All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining the first webinar in our deep dive webinar series, Working Smarter with Smart Docs. Just a quick overview on our speakers for today. Bob Savelson, our SVP of Sales and Marketing, will provide us with a quick introduction to modern requirements for DevOps, followed by Asif Sharif, our Chief Technologist, who will run through a detailed demo of Smart Docs. At the end, we'll leave about 15 minutes for a Q&A as well. On that note, if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat window, and we'll try to cover them during or at the end of the presentation. For those of you who don't know, this webinar is the first in our deep dive webinar series. The next two will cover review management and diagramming. So after the webinar wraps, we'll send an email with the video recording and links to the two upcoming webinars. So be sure to register if those topics interest you. All right, over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Ambreen. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As you know, or for those of you that aren't familiar with modern requirements, we have been working with Microsoft for over 10 years now, as our tool, Modern Requirements for DevOps, is built right into Microsoft's Azure DevOps platform, providing a single source of truth for all of our clients. The tool is browser-based and uses Azure DevOps as the database and application server. So everything that you create and manage in Modern Requirements is visible and saved in Azure DevOps. And we provide a single sign-in experience. So once you activate the license, you simply use your Azure DevOps credentials, whether you're operating in the cloud or on-premise. So getting to the topic of today, many of the clients that we deal with and talk to on a regular basis still are entrenched in using a diagram-centric approach to requirements management. And when we discuss some of the rationale, the first two items certainly come up quite regularly. Everybody knows how to use Word. It's easy to use. The people that consume the documents, whether it's stakeholders or developers, like to see it in a document format, much easier to understand and approve, as well as all of the other items that are listed on this slide. So there are some really compelling reasons why documents still have a place in a requirements management structure. However, in using documents, many clients complain about some of the shortcomings that they face, particularly the copying and pasting, because many clients use some form of tool to manage their development tasks and the testers to manage their testing tasks, and then downstream from that, the build and release functions. And copying requirements into those tools is tedious and prone for error. Attaching whole documents to work items in Azure DevOps or any other tool also creates the possibility of error, particularly having versions out of date. And you don't have a pristine audit trail that people can refer to afterwards. Reuse is simply cutting and pasting from Word documents, which is quite inefficient. And one that we hear very often is when requirements change, what document were they in? Do I have the right version of that document? How do I manage the impact of that change to all of the other requirements that are linked to that document? Performing all of those tasks for a change in a document-centric Word approach is very challenging. So for those reasons, we developed a module within our tool called Smart Docs. And Smart Docs is an online document authoring system that sits in front of the backlog view of modern requirements and really bridges the gap between a document-centric approach and a digital approach in Azure DevOps itself, allowing you to create requirements with many types of links using rich text and diagrams in a smart doc. And it provides the context for the consumers of that document, similar to Word, for review and approval. And Smart Docs is one of many modules that are available in modern requirements for DevOps. And of course, Smart Reporting is its sister, where you can report in a document form in everything that you have created in a Smart Doc and use a highly customized output document. And because the tool provides many function points for the requirements process, the testing process, as well as other functions within your product development lifecycle, it really provides value to quite a few different roles within your product development lifecycle. So hopefully that has created a foundation of understanding, and now we're going to turn it over to Asif, and he will do a deep dive into Smart Docs.
All right, thank you, Bob. And hello, folks. So just before I start with a quick a deep dive into how to configure and use Smart Docs, I've got a few questions. I'm doing a quick poll, and so this just helps me set the context of the people that are attending this event. And obviously, and there's actually a lot of people on this call, so I do want to get a sense of that. So here's the first question, and that's really, are you currently using modern requirements? So we'll just give it a couple of more seconds, and then we'll close this one. I've got 5 quick questions. So basically, about 60% of the people are saying that they do use modern requirements, and 40% are new. The next question is, are you personally using it versus your organization? And so it looks like half and half is the split there. And so we'll go to the next question. The next question is, are you currently using Smart Docs? So it's about 30% are using it. So a third is using it right now. All right. And then we've got which process template are you folks using today in your projects? Are you using Agile, Scrum, BA, Hybrid, or CMMI? And it'll be interesting to see what the result is. And I'll tell you historically what we have seen. So looks like we've got about 40% using Agile, 20% using Hybrid, and just as many using BA BOK. But of course, Scrum is a variant on Agile, so that would really be more like 65% is there. And BA BOK and CMMI are again in the same sort of ballpark, so that would be 25% using that type of template and 20% on Hybrid. And that brings me to the last question. Are you using, if you're using Azure DevOps, are you using it on cloud, on-prem, or you're not using Azure DevOps at all? And of course, Azure DevOps was previously known as TFS or VSTS. So looks like we've got the lion's share of people using it on the cloud. There's about 65%, and then 20% just above it are on-prem versus 15% are not using it. So that's perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that input. And with that, I will start the deep dive. So you should be seeing my Smart Doc window. Wrong project. So what I want to do here is use project 58, and we'll go down to boards, and we'll go to Smart Docs. Now, what I'd like to begin with is, so Smart Doc has is really a bridge between document and work item management. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute overview of some of the basic functionality of a Smart Doc, and then we'll get into how do you configure a Smart Doc, because the genius of Smart Doc is in its template designing. So what is a Smart Doc and why did we build it? So a Smart Doc is really a document-like view where not only can you see the work items, but you can also see its properties. Right? You can see the Smart Doc in a document view, or you can see it in the outline view. And there's an option on the top right for type, so you can even see which work item types are in this Smart Doc. So point one to note. A Smart Doc is really a collection of work items organized and presented in a certain way. So what this helps is not only in better and efficient authoring of requirements, but also in being able to consume this information so that it is user-friendly. Now, if you've used the backlog view, you will know that every time you have to see a work item, you have to double-click on it to open it and see it. There is no way to add introduction or overview. You cannot add a diagram in the context to set the context within the backlog for a set of work items. And nor can you see the details of work items in it. And if you have test cases, as in this case, you cannot see test cases. In fact, I should enable the type here. You cannot see test cases within the backlog or various other types of work items because it does not support anything other than parent-child relationship. Okay. So for these and many other reasons, we built Smart Docs. Okay. Now, in this particular Smart Doc, what you will see is that I start with introduction, and then I have an overview, and then I have a diagram, and then I have some in-scope statements before I start with my epic features and stories. But in stories, I'm showing not only the description, but also the acceptance criteria. So that's how this particular document looks like. And if you wanted to provide more details to it, then you simply double click on one of the sections and it opens up the work item, and then you can type in your info here. You can also insert things like tables, and you might, in Azure DevOps natively, you might actually be struggling with tables, because how do you insert a table in Azure DevOps natively? Well, you have to copy it and paste it from Word and all of that. But now you can just use the Smart Editor to not only add tables, but also add more richer formatting of the content, like being able to choose your font family. And there are a few other things that you can do in here that you can't do in Azure DevOps natively. Right? So once you provide the details, then that becomes part of your document view. And in the event that you're looking at diagrams, you can open up the diagram and do your creation of and management of your models in this view, where you can simply drag and drop things and create update your diagrams. And you can do this in a variety of different templates here. So you can use swim lane and data flow and UML and BPMN and business object models and scenarios, and you can annotate it. Right. And when you're done with it, you can, of course, this is just me being optimistic, stuck at home. So there you go. And there you go. So now the diagram is updated within SmartDoc. So this is like having Visio directly in Word. Okay. So now you can imagine if you were in the backlog, you would not have all of this, and you would have to double click on every work item to see the details and remember it as you drill down through other work items. It is not easy to consume data in the backlog or the query view, but in a SmartDoc, it takes the advantage of what we've been doing for years, using documents to communicate. But this also at the same time gives you the work item. So for example, if I were to go and create a new user story here, if I were to create a new user story, so I could say new user story X, then a link has been created between user story and user management. If I go then create a test case here, what you will see is if I open up the standard work item detail window, is that the parent is the user management feature, and test case is linked with the tested by link type. So you know when you have a work item and you want to create a test case, you have to do this, and if it's existing, you have to click this, and then you have to find the work item and then link it, or you have to do new, and so it's a bunch of clicks you have to do. Here, a SmartDoc has been configured so that when a test case is created underneath the user story, it automatically creates the right type of link for you. All right, so that's some of the basics. I'll just collapse the left side. Now, the other thing I want to quickly say here is that within a SmartDoc, you could have the same work item appear many places. So let's go to the outline view again and see that there's a test case here, which is linked to multiple requirements. So you'll see the ID is the same. So in SmartDoc, you can actually have a many-to-many relationship. So if you look at 6058, then you can take this test case and simply drag and drop it on here and have that reappear under this. So many a times when you're doing things, we're identifying risks or test cases or requirements that might actually belong to other work items at a higher level, then you can use SmartDocs to sort of bring it all together nicely, which of course you can't do in the backlog view. Right. Now you can also bring hierarchies here. You can bring a whole tree of work items and drag and drop it and bring that in. All right. We'll come back to insert later on. All right. So, what you'll note here is that depending on where I am, I'm getting different options. So from the root of the document, I can create a section, an epic. I can create a diagram like this one. But if I go to the next level, I get different options. And if I go to here, I get different options. So you'll see that different options are presented based on the context you are in. You define this as in the meta template designer. So I want to review a couple of different techniques in the meta template designer. So how do you design this thing? Actually, just before I get to the meta template designer, let me just cover off versioning, because I do want to spend the lion's share of the time on meta templates. So you can version your document. So you can create multiple versions of the same document, and you can open up previous versions and see how things look like at that point in time, right? So now you can see how things look like when the document was created. And if I generate a Word document from here, it'll be sort of that historic version of the Word document. You can also clone it. And clone basically will make a copy of all the work items as it were when the version was created and the new Smart Doc was created. So you can almost think of it as a deep branch. When you compare it, by default, it'll compare it to the current version, and you'll see a red line view of what actually has changed. Now, you might be thinking that, hey, Azure DevOps has a history. So let's take a look at the history. So if you look at the work item history, we know this changed to that. So I know I can see I've added a table in here as we just did, but there's some other information in there as well. What changed in it? And what if you have multiple changes? How do you know what exactly changed from point A to point B? Now, if you're absolutely brilliant, you could probably, if you had a photographic memory, you could actually tell the difference and then add up all the changes in your mind and you'll know what changed. But obviously, most of us cannot do that. So having a red line view of what has changed between two versions of a Smart Doc really helps with the usability of the system, of the document, of the work items, because now we know what exactly changed, so we can deal with it appropriately. Otherwise, we would be struggling to even understand what has changed and how do we deal with it if we don't understand it. Now, not only can you compare a Smart Doc to a given version, but to any other version. So if you had created 10 versions that be listed here, you can compare to any other version and see the delta. So any version can be compared to any version, and you can save this as Word, where you would have a redlined document, or in PDF format as well. And that is why I started by saying this Smart Doc provides you with the best of both worlds of document management at the same time as work item management. Because the fact of the matter is that when you do create user stories, so when I create a user story, you do want to be able to manage its states, right? So you could say this is now active, or see this in the Kanban board, or assign this to certain people, and so on and so forth. So you do want atomic management of your work items. So Smart Docs, again, brings it all together in a nicely packaged way of what both creating content, but at the same time for consuming that content by the various stakeholders you have. Now, I'll just make a quick point here. To author a Smart Doc, you do need a model requirements license. But to view it, you don't. You can actually view a Smart Doc as a stakeholder, which is a free license. So you may have a lot of stakeholders that just view it, but of course, the people that contribute to it, the authors, would use a proper license for model requirement. Now, there are a few other things. Like, for example, if you look at sort of, you can indent and outdent these things as well. So if you had, say, if you had a feature, a sub-feature here, and this had a sub-feature, I could take this, which is at the 4th level here, you can see, and I can indent it. So now this is, so this parent-child relationship between them broke, and this became the child of the one above it, of user management. Okay. So indent outdent works like this. When you remove a work item from the document, please note that a removal is simply it's removing it from the document. Okay. It is not removing it from your project. Now, you can easily conceive that the same work item can be in many documents. So just because you remove it doesn't mean you want to delete it. So it's simply a remove from the document is what it does. And then, of course, this icon was, as I've used before, is to open up the standard work item window. All right, so we covered many of these things. Of course, any smart doc can be saved as Word in a WYSIWYG manner, as PDF, or you can run Smart Report and generate your customized report based on Smart Docs. We'll actually do a separate deep dive on reporting, in which we'll cover that. You can do reviews of your Smart Doc and get people to provide feedback, and you can have collaboration. Or you can get sign-offs. And in fact, if you have need for e-signature, like many of our clients do that have to report to FDA or internal audits, our review management also supports e-signature, which is Part 11 compliant, that many of our clients have validated. So, all right, so that's some of the basics, right? Oh yeah, one last thing on the basics before I go to the Meta Template Designer is Discover. So each of the Modern Requirements module has a Discover button, which brings up this panel. It's a modeless panel so that you can work on your application and have this open at the same time. It's really the frequently asked questions. And so if you click on how to indent, outdent, or whatever the case may be, it's got a sort of a brief step-by-step on how to do that. By the way, this thing at the bottom right, we actually worked with IIBA, and in collaboration with them, we created a couple of process templates. One is called the BA BOK process template. The other is called the BA BOK Agile template. These are based on the BA body of knowledge, and its Agile version that IIBA has published. So we worked with them to come up with these two process templates. So you will see actually this particular project that I'm using is a hybrid template. So it's got both requirements and user stories. All right, so let's dive into meta templates. What is a meta template? So folks, now you can switch from your hat to your geek hat, right? So let your geek come out, because meta templates are very powerful and is the foundation of how Smart Docs works. Now, not everybody will create meta templates. These are created by whoever is going to administer the system, but it's important to know the power of the meta template. So when we looked at this document, and again, what I'll do is I'll go to the outline view, show you the work items. What does the meta template for this one look like? So let's go here. So if I go here, this is what the meta template looks like. Now, in this particular meta template, let me read this to you. What this is saying is that when I create a document from this meta template, the root of the document should be a document work item type. And it should use the parent-child relationship if it can, alternatively use a related relationship type. So imagine you have a feature that has a requirement, and you have another feature that needs to have the same requirement. Well, that same requirement cannot have two parents. So you might say, hey, for the first one, use a parent-child, but for the second one, use related, but show it to me as a hierarchy. I want to see the same requirement appear twice. So that's what this alternate link type is for. And I'll get into these later. And then we are saying that under the document work item, there should be a section work item. Now, section is a simple but a very useful work item type. A section is a placeholder for content. So what types of content could you have? Things like introduction, overview, in scope, or whatever else. In fact, we have clients that actually will only have sections in their document. Okay. And then they'll spec out any document within a smart doc. And so that would be a very generic document with just sections in it. But in this particular case, I'm saying it can have epic underneath the section, and that epic can have features, and features can have requirements. You see, when I define requirements, I'm saying this should be a requirement here, and that it should be recursive. What recursive means is that a requirement can have a requirement underneath it, so I don't have to explicitly put a requirement underneath this. Now, of course, this is a hybrid template. And in this particular case, a requirement can have user stories, and that can have test cases. But you see, what you should note here is that I'm telling it to use the tested by link type. I don't want it to use the parent-child or related link type, but I'm telling it to use this one instead in this instance. So I'm overriding what link type should be used between user story and test case. And then I can also create non-functional under the feature, and I can have diagrams, and diagrams can have user stories underneath it. And in user stories, I've said at the bottom here that I want to show description and acceptance criteria. If in the event you don't choose anything as to what fields you want to show, it will show the description by default. But if you do want to be specific, then you can add whichever fields you want, and then you have to be explicit if you want to see the description field in Smart Docs. Now, could you enable all the fields of a work item? You certainly could, but of course that would make the document very difficult to read. So your document should only show fields that are relevant in the consumption of the document for most people. Okay, so that's the process. That's the meta template that we used to define this document. Now let's take a look at a different example and see how it works. I'll show you this particular document. But in this document, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this feature for now. So I just have a section in there. But let's take a look at the meta template for this thing, and then we'll see how the document works. In this particular example, what I've done in here, I want to demonstrate some of these features. Again, typically when I create documents, I always keep document at the root. Of course, if you haven't defined a document work item type, or a section work item type, or a diagram work item type, I highly recommend you do that. And these are just basic work items. You don't have to do anything special with properties unless you want to, but the basic work items instances are just fine. And those of you who know the difference between the inherited process template and the XML-based process template, Model Requirements works with both. And we inherit the process template from Azure DevOps or TFS. So you would add these work item types, and then you would simply select the document work item type from here. Now, in this thing, what I'm saying is that the document can have sections. Inevitably, every document I create has sections. And when we consult with clients, we always end up creating a section under the document, because you always want to give it some area to hold the preamble content like introduction. And then I've said I want to have features, and features can have requirement type. But here's what's interesting. You will see under feature, the work item type is a feature. But under the requirement type, I've said this is actually a section. But it's not a section of any ordinary type. It is actually marked as a ghost link. Okay. So, and then underneath that, you can create a user story. But in creating this user story, I've given it a label. But let me come back to that later on. Let me demonstrate to you, what does it mean to mark this as a ghost, and why did I create this? So imagine in my document, I have a feature, and I'm going to call this feature X. But the feature X has both functional requirements and non-functional requirement in it. So I want to create some way of grouping it. I'm going to go create a requirement type heading called functional requirement, and then I'm going to call it NFR. And underneath the functional requirement, I'm just going to go and create a requirement called user story 1. And user story 2. And here again, I'll go create the same thing again, and I'll call it user story 3, and that's my NFR, user story 4. Now, if you look at the work item type here, if you look at the type there, what do you see? You see that both FR and FR are sections. Now, if you created a link between the section and the feature, so this would be a parent, this would be a child, and this would be a child of that, the section is strange. It would not show first in the backlog. The section was just a placeholder. I did not want to really link anything to it. And that is why I marked this section as a ghost link. And what does that in turn mean? That if I open up the feature, the linking would go through the ghost and link to the user story. The feature would go through this ghost work item and link to that user story. So if I open this up, you should see, as we do, that the user stories are now linked to the feature. But from a document readability perspective, having a heading that allows me to group things nicely is very useful. Okay, so that is what ghosts are used for, right? So let's go again, take a look at the meta template for ghost. And so it was this here, which was a section work item, again, just a regular heading or a placeholder. And I changed the label of this to say it's a, now I could say this should be, let's say I want to say it should be a requirements heading. Okay. Or a requirement type heading, let's say. Maybe that's a better thing there. So I'll save this. Okay. Let's close this. So now if I go into the section, what does it do? It doesn't say requirements type. Why? I just changed the label. It doesn't show the label because the meta template is embedded into a smart doc. So if you do want to update the Smart Doc, click on this little icon in blue at the top left, and this will then allow you to apply the changes to your Smart Doc. If you had 10 of them, you can apply it all at once. And this in turn will give us the ability to now see the new heading. Okay. So remember, this is the ghost. You might even want to put the word ghost in there because somebody might intuitively think that this is parent-child here, where it's really a ghost in there. Okay. All right. So that's about the ghost. Again, the basic intent is structurally it makes sense, but linking-wise it doesn't make sense. And therefore, using the ghost gives you both structural presentation of information, but the linking is done exactly the way you want it to, because you can link the two things. And we also saw how you can use this label to actually give it a different type of information. So let's take a look at one other thing, a feature. When I create a feature, I've said the default should be, of priority should be 3. And I can add multiple defaults in here. So I could say the effort should be 10. Okay. So I can set up defaults here. And again, if you do want to update the template, if you create a new one, of course, it will use the new configuration, but otherwise you have to update it. So if I go now and create a feature here, and we take a look at this feature, then you can see my priority is 3, is my effort is 10. And so this will be very useful whenever you need to say, whenever I create a feature at this level, then this is the defaults it should have. So if you further go down to this particular one, when I create a high priority user story, which is the label I've given it, I've set the priority to be 4. Assuming in this case 4 means high. And so I change the label, I change the defaults. But if you look at right underneath it, I again have the same user story work item, but I say low priority, and I've set it to 1. So in this particular case, what we are really doing is we're saying, look, but you can have multiple user stories underneath this section, and each has a different label with a different default values. And if you wanted to, again, have multiple fields show up here, I could say I want description and I want acceptance criteria, but I don't want it to say description. So I'll just sort of say, get rid of the label. So it'll show the title and the description right away. And then it'll show me the label acceptance criteria before showing the value for it. Okay. Of course, you could leave the label description. Personally, I don't like that. I like to just have the description right up after the title. It's understood. You don't have to be explicit about it. So that's that. And then you've got inheritance. So what inheritance does, so you can say inherit properties. And what inherit property is basically saying is, so which work item is this user story linking to is the feature. It's not the heading, right? It's a ghost. So it's linking to this. So it's going to inherit the property, in this case, the priority property from the feature. So let's take a look at this one and see how that works. Let's go and to the section here, and we'll create this user story, which is supposed to inherit the property. So I'll say inherited property, inherited priority from FR. So I'm just going to create a user story like this. And when I open it up, you'll see this has the value of 3. Well, why does it have the value of 3? Because this feature has the value of 3. So if this was any other value, then the lower level work item would simply inherit that value. Okay. So one interesting case is you could sort of go and you could say, at the document level, I'm going to define an area path, and then any new work item I create in here should inherit that area path. So in that case, go and define the default value of that area path at all levels. So start inheriting value from here, or however you need to do that. Okay. Now, of course, the best way to learn this is to practice. Take a sandbox, go to a project, a test project, and create a bunch of permutations on this. It's relatively simple to use. We do have a lot of good training material on our website. So if you do go to modernrequirements.com and then go to our help center, under the help center, you will find resources as boot camps. There are 4 topics with different things. This one is all about smart docs. So you can go into that, or you can actually go to the tutorial, which are more in-depth, and go through the resources there, right? We will be sending a recording of this webinar so that you can view it at leisure, or if you've not been able to attend this webinar and you get the link, you can view it then. And that is Smart Docs and the Meta Template Editor. The one last thing I will mention here again is not everybody needs to know the Meta Template Editor. Once you have defined the Meta Template, it is very easy to create your documents, because all you do is you go new document, and you will choose your document template or meta document template, and then just continue doing what you need to. So in fact, if I go to the document template, let's go here, and then what I'll do is I'll just choose my webinar template here, and you see something interesting. The difference between a document template and a meta template is that in a document template, you might have predefined content, where in a pure meta template, there is no content, it's only structure and rules. But a document template has both the structure and rules, but also predefined content. So if I go create this test document, it will, you can see, it created a bunch of items for me with the right link types and with its description and everything. Okay. So what you do is whenever you want to create a document template versus a meta template is created from here, right? So you create the meta template, or you modify the structure of a document template also from here. But for the default content you want to go in there, you basically create all the sections in it. So it's quite conceivable that most of your document templates would have stuff like this with some direction to people as to what they need to do. And then you would save this as a document template. And that means that this meta template now will have these default sections as part of the document template. So this is really similar to a Word document template file, as in a DOTX file. And so yeah, so you have these document templates in there. That covers most of the things, if not all of the things I wanted to show in Smart Docs. And what we'll do now is we'll open up the Q&A, and we'll answer your questions that you have.
Okay, thanks, Asif. There are a few questions that people have posed. The first one is, can multiple people work on a smart dock, a large smart dock at one time?
Yes, you can. So you'll note that in a smart dock, there is actually no check-in, check-out. You just work on it, and as you're working, it's saving. It's like using Office 365 online or Google Docs. It just sort of automatically saves. So you can have multiple people work on it.
Another question is, how do you reuse a work item?
So the reuse work item is, let me actually clean this up here. So I only have some data. So if by reuse what you mean is that I want to sort of have the same work item reappear in the document, then yeah, you just click on insert and you find the work item, and then you drag and drop it, and you put it where it's permitted, right? So you just sort of run a query or search or find by ID, and you drag and drop it. In the event that you do run a query, such as let's do this one here. No, that's not terribly useful. Let's do this one. So I could now take a whole bunch of user stories from here and drag and drop it and put it in there. And now these user stories have been added. Of course, if they're duplicates at the same level, you're not allowed to have duplicate work items as siblings. So eliminate those. And you can also take hierarchies and drag and drop them in there and bring the work items into a smart dock. Although there is a whole another deep dive we're going to do on reusability, which is not simply how do you bring it into a smart dock, but how do you create a library of reusable assets and reuse requirements across projects and through library.
So there was a bit of elaboration on the reuse. Can you use the same work item in different smart docs?
Yes, absolutely. You do exactly the same thing. You find it, you drag and drop it. So a single work item can appear multiple times in the same smart doc, as in the case with test cases, or any other work item. Or you can use have the same work item in multiple smart docs. And in fact, one of the things you can do is if you if you're in a work item window, from wherever you get to it, you can also go to the linked artifact window, and the linked work artifact window will show you which smart docs a given work item is in. It will also show you which baselines and reviews a work item is in, but you can always find which smart docs a given work item is in.
Thank you. So the next question is, even though the section links were ghost, are the section work items still showing up in the backlog?
No. So the section work items do not show up in the backlog. So it does not clutter your backlog. In fact, in this case, you will see your feature and your user story that did get linked, although you had a ghost in between. So you'd see the feature and user story in your backlog, but not the section work items.
Here's one that I think deals with reporting a little bit. Can you reuse a work item in multiple smart docs with varying content? Example, work item introduction overview, which could be different for each requirement document.
Yeah, you can. So in this particular case, if I go turn this on here, so this introduction here, now you could use the same work item in another document if it is the identical introduction. If it is not the identical content, then obviously you create a new introduction for that document. But if you did find that in a given release, multiple documents shared the same introduction, you could just define it once and then reuse it. Just one other thing, actually, there's one other variations you can do. So say in one document, I'm showing for a given work item, title and description, but in another Smart Doc, because I've set up the right meta template, I'm showing title, description, and a few other properties. So you could have the same work item showing up differently within different documents because they're based on different meta templates.
Well, the next question is, if I have wiki articles that cover background, scope, etc., what is the best way to use those to populate sections in a Smart Doc?
Copy and paste it. Yeah, I mean, if it's in wiki, you have the content there. Just copy that content, bring up the Smart Editor, and then paste it. And then it will give you an option. Do you want to keep the formatting, or do you want to do a more plain paste? And then and that's it. So you just copy and paste it and bring it here. And you see, that's exactly what I was talking about. What now people are having to resort to is, instead of creating, because without modern requirements, there's no Smart Docs, then people keep some information in wikis and some information in requirements, and somehow magically people are supposed to connect it. Of course, it's really hard. So copying and pasting it into a Smart Doc section work items would be the smart thing to do. Really good question.
Next question is, can I create a Smart Doc from a pre-existing item in DevOps?
Yes. Yes, you can, in the sense that if you were to create a new document here, and let's take this one, and I'll just be again lazy, just call it test, some number. If you basically did the insert and dragged and dropped it, you can take a whole hierarchy from here and drag and drop it in there. And then the whole document would get created for you based on existing work items. And the only reason I'm not showing you hierarchy here is because none of my queries are set up for hierarchies. So that's unfortunate. But it is simply a function of dragging and dropping the work items from the right. Actually, you know what? Let me actually do one quick thing. Let me show you, because I think there is value in seeing how this could work. I'll just do Epic, and then I'll do tree view here, and then I'll say I want up to user story. Actually, no, this is the wrong type. Let me get rid of that. Okay, so I've got this hierarchy here. I'll just save it, and I'll call this rectory in my shared query. Right, so I've got some content here, and what this then means is that if I had to, no, I need to refresh the document here. But let me just do a quick refresh there, and to make sure that I get this query there. So now here I have a tree here, right? So in here, what's the structure here? So I can put Epic at the root, so that's good enough. So what I'll do is that I'll say, hey, include this whole hierarchy in there, and then I'll take this hierarchy, and then I'll simply drag and drop it there, and voila. Okay. So you can always create a new Smart Doc based on existing work items.
The next question is it possible that a requirement is removed automatically from a smart doc when its state is set to rejected in Azure DevOps?
No, that is not possible. So one of the things we try not to do in a smart doc is to automatically change things. So that if work items get added or removed without it being an explicit intention. So imagine if you had a Word document and things vanished and appeared, that would be unnerving. So that's the type of approach we have taken, is to have it more user-driven as opposed to query-based or that type of logic. Having said that, we are actually looking at a variation of a smart doc with queries, dynamic queries in a smart doc, and that might solve the problem that you're talking about.
So that covers the next question about can you create queries to search documents? The next question is, if an existing requirement has a parent, is there any warning that the relationship is changing if a new parent is defined by adding or moving the requirement in a smart doc hierarchy?
No, it behaves the same way as the backlog does, because what happens in the backlog is when you drag and drop a work item from one level to the other, as in like this, it just changes the hierarchy for you. It doesn't tell you that I'm going to change the parent from feature 2 to feature 1. It just does it. So it's the same thing when you move things around. It just does that.
The next question is there an option to define default formatting for smart doc content? For instance, can the default font of descriptions be defined as Arial?
So actually there's a couple of things. One is when you do use a smart report to generate a document, you can define your own templates, your own formatting. When you save this as Word, there's one thing we did in Smart Report where when you saved something to a document, we could inherit the formatting, the font style, and so on from Word. So that particular function is really achieved through this inherit Word styling option. Just before you export it to Word. So if you use this one, and you save it to Word, and in here choose the Word template that you want to use, and that Word template would have the style that you wanted to inherit. So you got this option in here. However, when you save it directly from here, it does ask you the template, but it doesn't give you the option to inherit the style from Word. So we are actually going to add a checkbox in here that says inherit style from Word, because we have solved the basic problem. It's just not exposed in here as yet. So that's going to be coming shortly.
Then there's a question about review. So when doing a review in modern requirements, it creates a work item which looks like binary when opening it up in Azure DevOps. How could someone who was not the review requester nor the review responder see the content?
Yes. So although this is not a smart doc question, it's more of a review management question, which we will cover, I think, in our next webinar. But the answer to that is, if you go to a review and share the URL on that review, So, or you go to the work item artifacts window, you can see the reviews that exist. You click on it, and as somebody who is just a member of the project can view the reviews. So in MR 2020 that we just released, that is a new capability we've added, where you can have greater transparency, of course, only to the people that are part of the project, to be able to view the review, although they may not be able to participate in providing feedback unless they will be requested to do that. But of course, in our next webinar, I will cover that question in more detail.
So I believe we have covered all of the questions that were posted. It is 6 minutes past the hour, and we really want to thank you very much for your questions and your participation. And we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. We have 2 more left in the series. And feel free, for those of you that aren't Modern Requirements users, to request an evaluation so you can try all of the great features that Asif went over in the presentation today.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing, folks. So right now, this webinar series has 3 events planned, and so one today and then these 2. But we are going to continue with this deep dive webinar series on different topics. Our intent is to continue every other week until we have covered all the different topics that Modern Requirements covers, and all of these will then become part of our website under the deep dive section. And with that, we thank you again. You all stay safe, stay indoors, and we'll speak soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.